and ways in which you can get involved, just go to pcmlincoln.org. Remember, when we all do a little, we change a lot.
You know you want those Wingstop boneless wings. With the boneless meal deal from Wingstop, you get 20 boneless wings in 4 delicious flavors and a large order of hand-cut fries for just $16.99. What are you waiting for? More wings, more flavor, more bang for your buck. The $16.99 boneless meal deal from Wingstop. Order now from wingstop.com. Valid at participating locations for a limited time on orders for pickup or delivery placed via wingstop.com or the Wingstop app. Prices may vary by location. See wingstop.com/offers for full details.
Finally, a good reason to have a smart house. Just say, Alexa, play 93.7 The Ticket, and we'll magically start playing. How's it work? Nobody knows. Don't ask questions.
Did you know that AmeriCorps programs improve lives, strengthen communities, and foster civic engagement in Nebraska? For example, members serving with AmeriCorps programs like Partnership for Kids provide kids with the support they need to succeed in school and prepare for their dream career. Discover more about AmeriCorps programs making a difference in your community at serve.nebraska.gov. Paid for by Serve Nebraska, aired by the Nebraska Broadcasters Association and this station.
When you're high, you feel different. You think different, you talk different, you draw different, you listen to music different, but you probably knew that. Problem is, you also drive different, and not in a good way. That's why driving high is illegal everywhere. So if you're high, just don't drive. Make a plan to get a sober ride. Because if you feel different, you drive different. Brought to you by NHTSA and the Ad Council.
Mario fue pintor más de 30 años. Cuando me dijo que se le estaban olvidando las cosas, fue difícil. Un día me dijeron que pintara el marco del lado por dentro y pinté el lado de afuera.
Yo le diría a la gente que le diga a su familia lo que está pasando con él.
Si algo se nota diferente, podría ser Alzheimer. Es momento de hablarlo. Visita alz.org/nuestras historias para saber más. Un mensaje de The Alzheimer's Association y The Ad Council.
Finally, a good reason to have a smart house. Just say, Alexa, play 93.7 The Ticket, and we'll magically start playing. How's it work? Nobody knows. Don't ask questions.
Are you ready for a new opportunity? Check out Sandhills Global. Join a dynamic team where your skills are valued and your career can soar. We offer full-time positions with a 4.5-day work week, competitive pay, excellent benefits, and a positive work environment. From IT and marketing to sales and finance, we're looking for talented individuals just like you. Apply today at sandhills.jobs and take the first step towards an exciting future. That's sandhills.jobs. Don't wait, apply now.
It's game on at Elway Power Sports of Lincoln, Nebraska's premier power sports dealership. Stocking all the top brands, including Can-Am, Honda, Polaris, Kawasaki, CF Moto, Suzuki, Yamaha, Sea-Doo, Manitow pontoon boats, and Triton trailers. Come check out Nebraska's newest Indian motorcycle dealership, plus score big on their massive selection of side-by-sides, all-terrain vehicles, motorcycles, and power watercraft. Elway Power Sports of Lincoln has it all under one roof at their new 27th and I-80 location, and they can't wait to get you set up for the summer.
With UBT, you've got total control over your money. Like Doug, who runs his game day tailgate like a well-oiled machine.
I got burgers, brats, chicken, dogs, plus all the fixins. And with the UBT Go app, I can track my food spending from anywhere.
Pro move.
They don't call me Grill Sergeant for nothing.
No matter your goals, UBT helps you feel good about reaching them. Union Bank and Trust, member FDIC.
Live from the heart of Lincoln, America, welcome to Ticket Weeknights on 93.7 The Ticket and theticketfm.com.
All right, welcome back in to 93.7 The Ticket. Going solo here for this hour here on Ticket Weekends. We still got 2 more high school class championship games coming your way here. Nick Sainer joined by Jay Foreman, I believe so, for the rest of these games here coming up. I'll give you guys a quick update on what we've seen so far on the men's side for Championship Saturday. Starting with Class A, the last game that we just had, Papillion La Vista South wins it in a thriller. I think most people were looking at this one thinking it was going to be a good back and forth game, and it lived up to be exactly that. Papillion La Vista South wins it 61-58. Your Class A champions, and we still have Class B. As I said, that will be our 6:15 game later tonight. In Class C1, Ashland Greenwood comes out of your champion, defeating Omaha Concordia 53-39. And Class C2, again, that game will be going on. That is our next one. That is between Bergen and Cross County. And then in Class D1, we had Johnson Brock win it 61-46 over Howells Dodge. And then as well, we got one more 8:15 p.m. St. Mary's versus Wynot, and that will be your Class D2 game. So, like I said, we got plenty of high school games left here, and Nick Sainer will be calling those alongside what has been a cohort of partners here. Might be Austin Orman, Jay Foreman, Eric Strickland, but nonetheless, all great color commentators to join alongside him. We can keep talking hoops here. I think I'm going to switch gears a little bit here. 402-464-5685. We can talk NBA. We can talk some high school hoops, even college hoops, but I do want to talk Husker football because throughout the 2 weeks here with all these high school state basketball games, I hadn't had a ton of time to talk about it. So again, if you guys want to join in, Starter Heyman text line is available for you, as well as any of these streams if you want to put a face to the voice. I just want to go through and really try to figure out, as the fans, what do they think they need to see in order for this next year for Husker football to be an improvement from what it was last season? You finished the year pretty good. You beat Boston College, not only to get to 6 wins, to break what was one of the most unfortunate traditions in college sports. You might argue the next saddest tradition is the Nebraska basketball tradition of not winning a tournament game. That won't be the case this year, so we'll just leave it at that. But football, they broke theirs. They finally got to a bowl game, being the only Power 5 program not to do so, since 2016. And then you make it, and then you also go ahead and win one, which was a gutsy win over Boston College. And that game certainly helped Ty Robinson out as well, on top of what he did on the combine and everything after. But when you look at Nebraska football schedule, I don't want to be in the classic camp of it's gettable, so therefore we can just start counting up the wins here. But at the same time, it is nice to see a schedule that isn't just loaded with an absolute gauntlet of matchups, especially when you're in the Big Ten and you got to play 9 conference games as opposed to the SEC playing only 8. And that kind of goes back to Matt Rule's whole reasoning as to, maybe we really don't need to play Tennessee, considering we're going to play 9 conference games and a conference that is absolutely loaded today. Whatever you think about UCLA, whatever you think about Washington, whether those teams are up or down, it's good competition. It's good competition that you're adding, and it just makes it for an absolute gauntlet. So obviously next year, as everybody's pretty well aware, if you don't have tickets, it might be too late already. Those prices got to be pretty high versus Cincinnati, that one at Kansas City. And then you get Akron, Houston Christian, Michigan, Michigan State. And again, that Akron, Houston Christian, Michigan State, that's 1, 2, 3, 4 home games back to back to back. Cincinnati, that neutral site game. And then you don't hit the road until October 11th. And you have on the road versus Maryland. And then you go back on the road versus Minnesota. And then you're back home versus Northwestern versus USC, on the road for UCLA, Penn State, and back home versus Iowa. So the way that schedule opens up. Now, Michigan, I don't know where they're going to be, but it's certainly a program that's not going to be falling apart in my eyes anytime soon. They did beat Ohio State last year, despite, their record significantly falling from the year prior. So it's a good team. I'm just not sure what version of them we'll see, but it's totally obtainable. And I hate using that word all the time, but what it's going to come down to is the offensive line as good as all the transfer portal players, in what Donovan Rayola is saying, in what really just this entire staff saying about the need to have a strong offensive line. It's been a part of Nebraska where it has been getting better. I don't just want to say, blame Donovan Rayola. The offensive line, last year in particular, it's getting better and better, especially when you added Dana Holgerson as the offensive coordinator. I was probably my biggest surprise out of the entire thing was the running game got much better when Dana took over on play calling. And when you hear a guy like Dana Holgerson constantly compared to an air raid minded offensive coordinator, you're not necessarily thinking the run game is going to get that much better. But that's exactly what it did. Some of it might have been obvious, right? Let's play Emmett Johnson, who looks like one of the best running backs we have on the roster, and give him the majority of reps. And he took advantage of it, but also still using Dante Daldo. And what I thought he was better at goal line situations. Dante Daldo was a very good back when it comes to finishing in the red zone, just putting his shoulders down and working through it. Emmett Johnson, he's more of just the best play I can really think of was versus UNI, where he hit the seam perfectly on a trap just to force those defenders to make an angle that was damn near impossible. And most running backs would want to bounce that outside, go towards the green space. He understood the angles, cut it straight up, knowing those defenders aren't going to have the speed to catch him, despite him not going straight towards just the open patch of grass to his left. That would have certainly resulted in 15 yards, but instead he shoots up the seam, just kind of at a high IQ, just good mechanics, good vision from the running back that allows him to get all the way to that 1 yard line or 2 yard line. So Emmett Johnson, him being back is a massive deal. Dana Holgorsen being the offensive coordinator, I think is a big part of why this offense is getting some of these recruits in. Because if you take the majority of what the Huskers offense looked like throughout last season, I don't know how many players would be super excited about it unless there's a big bag behind it. Now, that certainly is the case with the guys here now, but just about every university is throwing bags out. I think the bigger reason behind it is, yes, NAL matters, but there's also a guy in Dylan Raiola who, whatever you think about his TikToks and everything else, the guy's a hell of a recruiter for this program. I mean, he's done a really good job being out there in the open. You're hearing it from guys like Rocco Spindler, the Notre Dame transfer at that guard position, who's already had a lot of quotes. Who's just going to make him a favorite heading into the season. We'll see what the play looks like, but just everything at the podium so far has been what you want to hear. His trust in Donovan Raiola, him again complimenting Dylan Raiola, hearing comments of Dylan Raiola asking him, what did it look like over there, essentially? Paraphrasing, it's not verbatim, but asking him and just being genuinely curious, what did it look like? How did you guys get to that championship caliber level? Again, this is a Notre Dame team that lost in Northern Illinois. So it's not like they just played an easy schedule and they didn't have to handle adversity. They absolutely did. They had to handle adversity really early in the year when the entire country was dunking on them for losing to Northern Illinois. But they persevered through, and then they got enough on their resume to make it into the college football playoffs. And then they go ahead and they beat Georgia as well, probably the most significant win out of that run. And Penn State game was good. Penn State had such an easy route throughout that college football playoffs. I thought Boise State, they played well. I'm blanking on who that first round even was. But they had a couple of games there where I thought were relatively easy for Penn State. As long as they were the more physical team, they just had a better defense, in particular, really shutting down teams. And then when the offense came to pressure and they had to have a better performance versus Notre Dame, they just couldn't compete. But you give Notre Dame a ton of credit. And Rocco Spindler, again, I'm a big believer in when you have guys that know how to win, that have been at places where they've won before, that's valuable. And I know it's valuable because I watch enough Husker football to see this team in situation after situation where all they have to do is execute one drive, and that's the game. They win. And for whatever reason, no matter how they get to that point, up until last year, it's been more often than not, we've been dropping those games, and a lot of times it's not even the other teams just making phenomenal plays. And in those years prior, it was Nebraska shooting off 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 toes before they finally didn't have anything left to give and they lose the game. You get a guy like Rocco Spindler, again, it's valuable to have a winning mindset. And then again, you add Terry Braden, who, might be one of the more excitable hires for me anyways. Again, coming from the Kansas City Chiefs, been with that team for 8 years, has been there for those championship runs as an assistant defensive line coach. Another guy who has been around some of the best athletes at that position. Again, working with Jones is going to give you some insight on see what that guy's workload looks like on a daily basis. And then just the culture element of it. And I think Matt Rule's doing a really good job just slowly patching together this culture. The problem is, and it's not even a real problem, the question is, what are the expectations for year 3? You got a lot of really good players in the transfer portal. Now we got to see what they look like because we went through the same dance and song heading in last season. But even then, I think you could argue this transfer class has some even better talent in positions that we really need. Isaiah Nayor and Jamal Banks were fantastic. Unfortunately, I think it was more of a result our offense just wasn't in sync as much as it was those guys underperforming. You could definitely point out some drop balls, but for the most part, I mean, that same roster dropped 44 on a very good Wisconsin team. I shouldn't say very good Wisconsin team, but I should say a good defense Wisconsin team. And they dropped 44 on those guys and made it look easy. And that was the game where the offense started to look like it was finally clicking. All of a sudden, Jamal Banks and Isaiah Nayor, I don't think they woke up and became new players that day. I just think the offense finally found its footing and rhythm of what they were trying to do. And part of that was being a little more aggressive with Dana Holgorsen taking over. And at the same time, I think that's why those runs opened up so much. Because teams knew Dana Holgorsen is willing to punish you if you want to try to load up the box. So the times that they didn't, Emmett Johnson took advantage of it. And really up until that point, Dylan Raiola was struggling, This doesn't say it was all Satterfield's fault, but Dylan Raiola clearly was having a hard time in that stretch where Nebraska was just racking up losses when we were just one game away from going bowling. And in that stretch, where Dylan Raiola was having those interceptions, the offense just looked so out of sync. You didn't know if it was ever going to get better. And then you insert Dana Holgorsen late in the year. And to see that much improvement, I think is the exciting thing for most Husker fans. And the defense has just got to maintain some sort of level that they had last year. Even if they're not significantly better or even just slightly better, that's still going to be a good defense out there. There are some games where we can be disappointed in the defense, but really, when you got to put those guys out there after 3 and out, eventually something's going to break. Eventually you give enough scouting material, live material to that opposing team sideline. And today in the state of football, especially with a 105-man roster, with NIL, like these stats are becoming massive. These in-game adjustments, you got tons of coaches' eyes on these games, watching every little detail so that at halftime they can pick you apart and figure out where your weaknesses are and just totally exploit them. And I think that was a big problem for Dylan Raiola, mid-season. Got enough tape out there. Teams are really starting to identify where his weaknesses are, understanding that his pocket presence, unsurprisingly so, as a true freshman quarterback, was a little bit slow at times. He would sit in there too long. I don't want to say refused to use his legs, but he just clearly didn't see the times to escape that pocket. And I don't even mean this as a joke. Like the Patrick Mahomes comparisons, the one thing he could take from that comparison, and he did it versus Ohio State in particular, and a little more after Dana took over, was just use your legs, especially when it got to a point where teams were totally disrespecting his ability to use his legs at all. And it was never a thought that he was going to scramble out of the pocket straight up the field. So if he does more of that, just having that internal clock going in his head, that'll be a big step. And then we got to see, what do these wide receivers look like out of the portal? What does the development underneath the guys that we already have here look like? And then, of course, the defense, John Butler. I like the move that our DC is in-house. I'd imagine, stick with that 3-3-5. But, John Butler, he's going to have Phil Snow's help. Going back to how big these coaching staffs are getting. You got Phil Snow on staff. He's defensive-minded guy. Certainly going to be able to help John Butler in that area. And then you go to special teams. Ed Foley, he's still on staff as well. Despite adding Mike Eckler, you still have Ed Foley, who, say what you will about the special teams, he's certainly got a pocket when it comes to recruiting locally around here. And then when you go to offense, Satterfield's still on staff as well. So you bring in Dana Holgorsen, but you still got Satterfield. So we got a new OC, but the old OC is still here. We got a new special teams coordinator, but the old special teams coordinator is still here. We got John Butler elevated to defensive coordinator, but we got Phil Snow in as well to help him out as more of a, in my mind, I'd imagine most of his work is going to be with that defensive side of the ball. So that leaves Matt Rule with that CEO position, kind of similar to what Ryan Day had at Ohio State. And I'm not saying this is the recipe for success, but we did just see it work with Ohio State, and despite those guys losing to Michigan, they were able to rally back and make a deep playoff run, arguably having the toughest playoff run. They had to beat Oregon, they had to beat Texas, and then they had to beat Notre Dame. You feel bad for Oregon in that one. Your reward for going undefeated is getting a brutal matchup with Ohio State, and that's a topic of discussion for another time with the college football playoff bracket, especially as the Big Ten and SEC are proposing 4 qualifying bids from each of those conferences. But I like the CEO role for Matt Rule, because when you look at Matt Rule, he gets the title of program builder for what he did at Temple, what he did at Baylor, not so much over there at the Panthers. And even then, I almost want to blame Tepper more for that one than I do want to blame Matt Rule, because the Panthers still to this day haven't had any more success than what Matt Rule had down there. It's a good role, I think, for Matt Rule to be in that CEO position, to have more oversight just on the overall operations. He can go and practice, go to the areas that he thinks needs the most work, and his best ability, quality, just from the things I hear, I would assume it's just his leadership. That was one of the first things that Mike Eckler said when he got down here to Nebraska was, I hope you guys appreciate essentially how good of a coach this is and how good of a leader of men that Matt Rule is. And again, that's not me saying it. That's paraphrasing essentially what Mike Eckler said when he first got down here. So for him in that CEO role, if his biggest traits are just being this great leader, that makes a lot of sense to me. I do wonder what that payroll looks like at time, having that big of a staff. But again, when you're cutting it down to 105 roster limit, I understand that a lot of those guys were walk-ons. Makes it a little more manageable. And I didn't even mention Stewart. Stewart from the Patriots is the GM on this roster as well now. So college football is becoming a very much amateur pro version. It's taken on the likes of needing a GM because of what these NIL changes are coming down the road, because you only got 105 roster spots now. And again, that goes back to why we're not doing the classic red and white spring game, as opposed to we're just doing the Husker games. Again, fighting the transfer portal a little bit, because there's still 2 transfer portal periods out there. You got the December and you got the spring portal as well. And you don't want to put tape out there and have other teams go poach your guys after said red and white scrimmage, because now they got tape on them and they can go ahead and put a last minute bid in, see if they can pull them away despite them getting all their workouts and training for that spring game, just for them to get ripped away at the last second. So I totally understand why they don't want to do that spring game. And I'm glad they're still figuring out a way to do the Husker games. Also shined a little bit of spotlight on the volleyball program, shine spotlight on the soccer program. And they're also going to have some merch as well, I believe, over at the Hawks Center, where you can find a lot of the discontinued Husker gear, the stuff that, I think you see it on X every other week. There'll be a Husker coach with some really awesome gear, and everyone wants to know, where can I go and get that gear? Well, this will be an opportunity when they have those Husker games. I would imagine they'll have a lot of that cool stuff there, even some of the helmets, alternate jerseys, cool stuff like that. So the Husker games is a cool idea. But again, all that just to say, it's becoming such a amateur pro league that Matt Rule to take more of a CEO position, to have staff around him, almost the same way that you see these NFL teams have staff around him. Is it traditional? No. Is it what you wanted? I'm not entirely sure, but it is the direction of college football, at least right now. So I do think it's smart of Matt Rule, and, Troy Dannon as well, as he's part of this as the athletic department, to recognize what needs to be done to ensure Nebraska's success in the future. Because if you ever look, I'm 25 years old. It's not like I was alive to watch Tom Osborne dominate in the 90s. But the thing that I always hear about it, being born in 99, growing up, hearing the legacy of it, and just seeing the old YouTube films, was that Tom Osborne was good, not only because he was humble, he was a leader of men, obviously, but he was innovative. He was willing to change and adapt to find any sort of advantage possible to be better than the teams that were beating them before. And the most easy example of this is that strength and conditioning program. Nobody was doing that. So Tom Osborne gets ahead of it, and all of a sudden we have the best athletes in the country, especially when it comes to the ground game and the offensive line. And that's how you get the pipeline. You have to be innovative if you're ever going to catch up, because right now you're not going to have the same pull that Ohio State does, unless you have infinite money, which, I'm sure we don't. And I'm sure donors would hate to hear that we're just going to keep using as much money as possible to put a roster together. You have to do something different to gain some sort of edge. and Matt Rule taking the CEO position, bringing in Stewart as a GM. Not saying this is 100% surefire, it's going to work, but it is at least trying to get ahead of the ball here. The same way Osborne did it with the strength and conditioning program. That is now, it seems almost moronic that you wouldn't have something like that for an athletic group. So again, I just really like the direction of what Matt Rule is doing. We do got Swift from Lincoln. Other teams seem to be fine playing their spring game. Yeah, and that's up to debate, right? Like, I'm just saying, I don't blame Matt Rule for not wanting to do it. With 105 roster limit, it's not like without the red and white spring game, it is a great tradition, but we will still show up on Saturdays with or without that game. And it does give you an opportunity to shine light on the other programs here at the University of Nebraska. And again, it's not like we're dumbing it down so much it's not worth your time. It is now an all-day event. So the way I look at it is they're still doing what they can in their power to make it an enjoyable day for Husker fans. And I do get the mindset, and this isn't just made up in thin air. This happens. You go play spring game, other teams are watching it, and they're going to pluck players. If other schools are okay with doing it, that's fine. They can totally do that. They probably are totally okay with having that spring game, but there is a chance that their players may put on some good tape and they're going to get some portal offers that now you have to compete with financially. It adds just another thing to worry about. So if you're cool with it, do it. If you don't want to deal with it, then you don't have to do it. And I think either of those options is fine, but I'm not going to condemn one or the other because there's a reasoning behind it. And it's the same thing with the Tennessee game, right? As fans, do I want to see Tennessee, Nebraska? Absolutely. Would that be a great game to go to? Yes. But if you're Matt Rule and you play 9 conference games, and then one of your non-conference games is Tennessee, that's 10 games guaranteed that you better show up or you're going to lose. And even then, we can use the Northern Illinois example again. You're going to have Northern Illinois game. Well, that might still happen. But then when you look at the SEC and they're playing 8 conference games, and then, you can argue they have a tougher non-con game. Well, that's their way of playing 9 games that really matter on the resume. The Big Ten and SEC, I don't really care how they do it, but I can understand why you'd want to be competitive and how you're scheduling these games. The best way would be for the SEC and Big Ten, considering they're the 2 leading powers in college football, Big Ten, SEC, how many conference games should we play? Okay, let's both agree to it. And now we're each going to play 8 and schedule 1 tough non-con opponent, which is kind of hard to put on paper what that look like. Or we each play 9 conference games and you can schedule whoever the hell you want for those non-cons. Will that ever happen? I'm not sure, but it seems like the easier solution because again, we see it with these college football rankings and the AP poll and the playoffs. Those early games matter a lot when it's early. The later the season goes, those games seem to go a little bit out the window. So despite if we were to have a big win versus Tennessee early in the year, if we have wins that we're kind of on that bubble of those college football playoffs, because that game's earlier in the year, you're just not going to get the same respect as it would be if it was later in the year. And that's just how the AP polls have shaken out. So as a fan, I can totally understand if you want to see that Tennessee game. But again, there's a reasoning behind it. And that reasoning is this is in the best interest of this Nebraska football program. And you can still have the opinion that you want to see that game played, and that's totally fine. But I do see the reasoning behind Matt Rule not wanting to play that game. Again, looking at that conference, when you got to play 9 conference games, and now you want to schedule a really tough non-con game, and then you look over the water, well, not the water, you look over the country down to the SEC, and you see 8 conference games, and then whoever they want for those non-cons. Well, that being said, we'll go ahead and throw it to break. You guys can keep texting it if you want. 402-464-5685. We do have that Class C2 championship game at 4:15. So I'll join you likely for 2 more segments before we get back down to PBA with Nick Sainert. Appreciate you guys listening. I'll be back in a little bit.
At Doane University, we build leaders, and that means your success and achievements come first. Now is the time to get a glimpse into living and learning at Doane University through a personalized in-person or virtual visit. We know once you experience Doane, you'll see why it's a place where you can achieve your goals and shape your future. Schedule your personal campus visit today at doane.edu/visit.
Whether you buy a book or get a library card, just be sure to read a book. It can be an ebook, a comic book, or any new book at all. I'm Tim Royers, president of the Nebraska State Education Association. Take your young reader to the library, get some great books, and sit down together to read out loud. And help your more advanced readers find books they'll enjoy on their own. Reading is an important key to student success.
Sponsored by the Nebraska State Education Association, aired by the Nebraska Broadcasters Association and this station.
I didn't do it.
10 years later, at age 28, Jackie finished her high school diploma.
When I found out that I was pregnant, I know that I had to do something for myself if I wanted to make her a better person and provide a better life for her. My family never stopped pushing for me to be better because they knew what I could become and who I could become as a person. My support team is amazing. The educational director, my sister, and even my 7-year-old daughter has just been more than the support that I could ask for. I've been given an opportunity, and I'm just thankful for it.
No one gets a diploma alone. If you're thinking of finishing your high school diploma, you have help. Find free adult education classes near you at finishyourdiploma.org. That's finishyourdiploma.org. Brought to you by the Dollar General Literacy Foundation and the Ad Council.
Hey, it's me, your cell phone. We need to talk about something serious. I know you love me. I know you like using me wherever you are, but I feel like this isn't working out when you're driving. I know you may think that it's possible to focus both on me and the road, but I just don't feel the same way. I think we should spend time away from each other when you're driving. It's for the best.
Visit StopTextStopWrecks.org, a message brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, Project Yellow Light, and the Ad Council.
When you're high, you feel different. You think different, you talk different, you draw different, you listen to music different, but you probably knew that. Problem is, you also drive different, and not in a good way. That's why driving high is illegal everywhere. So if you're high, just don't drive. Make a plan to get a sober ride. Because if you feel different, you drive different. Brought to you by NHTSA and the Ad Council.
I used to smoke. I thought of cigarettes as my best friend.
They were always there for me when I needed a break.
I also thought cigarettes were my best friend, and then they gave me peripheral artery disease.
I smoked and had a stroke. Actually, multiple strokes.
I smoked and have heart disease.
Here's my tip. If cigarettes are your friend, you need a better friend.
Call the Nebraska Tobacco Quit Line, 1-800-QUIT-NOW, 1-800-784-8669. Paid for by Tobacco Free Nebraska. Aired with the Nebraska Broadcasters Association and this station.
Hey, it's me, your cell phone. We need to talk about something serious. I know you love me. I know you like using me wherever you are, but I feel like this isn't working out when you're driving. I know you may think that it's possible to focus both on me and the road, but I just don't feel the same way. I think we should spend time away from each other when you're driving. It's for the best.
Visit StopTextStopWrecks.org, a message brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, Project Yellow Light, and the Ad Council.
Tune in every Wednesday night from 6 to 7 p.m. as Lincoln Lighthouse's Executive Director Bill Mitchner educates listeners on the history of Lighthouse, their mission, and how you can get involved in shaping today's youth into tomorrow's adults. Every Wednesday night from 6 to 7 p.m. on 93.7 The Ticket and theticketfm.com.
Are you ready for a new opportunity? Check out Sandhills Global. Join a dynamic team where your skills are valued and your career can soar. We offer full-time positions with a 4.5-day work week, competitive pay, excellent benefits, and a positive work environment. From IT and marketing to sales and finance, we're looking for talented individuals just like you. Apply today at sandhills.jobs and take the first step towards an exciting future. That's sandhills.jobs. Don't wait, apply now.
Mike, I've been thinking, our house could really use a makeover. How about new siding?
I've been thinking the same thing. Have you heard of James Hardy?
Yes! Sarah down the street had Roofing Service Company install James Hardy siding on their home, and they love it.
Roofing Service Company does have great reviews.
They took her through the design process and made everything super easy.
Roofing Service Company offers expert design and installation. Couple that with James Hardy's durable products and variety of colors, you and your family will love your exterior remodel. Just visit roofingservicecompany.com. That's roofingservicecompany.com.
You know you want those Wingstop boneless wings. With the boneless meal deal from Wingstop, you get 20 boneless wings in 4 delicious flavors and a large order of hand-cut fries for just $16.99. What are you waiting for? More wings, more flavor, more bang for your buck. The $16.99 boneless meal deal from Wingstop. Order now from wingstop.com. Valid at participating locations for a limited time on orders for pickup or delivery placed via wingstop.com or the Wingstop app. Prices may vary by location. See wingstop.com/offers for full details.
Back to the Ticket weeknights on 93.7 The Ticket and theticketfm.com.
All right, welcome back in. We got a little bit of time here left before we throw to another break. And then, like I said, I might join you one more time before we're ready for some more games down there at the Vault with Nick Sandert. And I believe Jay Form will be joining him again. And again, that is some Class C2 action. In that one, you are going to have, let me pull it up here, Bergen versus Cross County. Bergen, the number 8 seed, climbing all the way through C2. And then Cross County, the number 3 seed, beating my own alma mater, Cedar Catholic, in that quarterfinal. It should be a fun one. And I talked about this with Jackson earlier. When you're watching these state games, the C2, C1 games are always really interesting. Not because of, the players or the people or anything like that. It's more just the location. Just coming from a school that was C2, they're much further apart. Like, you get a pocket in Northeast Nebraska, and then, you got a bunch of other places where they're so far away that you're not going to travel necessarily all the way, for 4, 5, 6 hours to go play this team. So as a result, you don't really meet these teams until you get to postseason play. And when you're trying to figure out strength of schedule, it ebbs and flows so much within C2, C1, just depending on which guys are growing up at that environment and who's that next, up and coming star at those schools, that it just really changes a lot. So again, I'm not entirely surprised to see an 8 seed making a run all the way after they defeated number 1 Freeman. Freeman, by the way, was 24-1. Bergen was 16-9. But again, you have to look at, how tough is that region in particular? How familiar are these with these schools, coaches? So it's always a lot of fun. And we will have that one up next. So again, C2, that's 4:15 game, Bergen versus Cross County. All right, we only got a little bit of time here left. So we'll just talk about this and maybe talk about more on the other side. We can talk some Husker hoops here. The obvious one is, Nebraska basketball, postseason play, anything but the NCAA tournament is going to feel a little bit disappointing to the fans, especially when last year, just the excitement that was the ride of Keisei Tamanaga, and I'll throw in Rink Mast as well, a guy that I've been, really high on throughout his entire career at Nebraska, just simply for his playmaking ability. Every team needs a guy like Rink Mast, who's got a little bit of everything in his tool belt. And, there were situations, the Purdue game's always the easiest one to bring up, not only because he went straight at Zach Edey early and actually was winning the battle and won the battle for most of that entire game. His just ability to make good passes off the high elbow, play off of pick and roll with those guards, knowing when to roll really hard or when to pop. And then when he does roll, you saw this problem a few times where we'd have some pick and rolls and whoever was rolling was just kind of hanging out in no man's land, not really understanding the spacing of the court. Rink Mast, essentially, all that just to say, a high IQ player with good passing ability who can also, the cherry on top, if he's feeling it, have a really good day from the 3-point line as well. And as good as Keisei Tamanaga was, when we lost Rink Mast, that was kind of the crux that I think really hurt this year. And it's not just like, we can't blame Fred Hoiberg at all for it. I mean, he knew after that Kansas State game, that's when we find out Rink Mast has a little bit of an injury. And then we knew into the offseason he was going to get surgery on that and he would be out. And I do think that's where we might have thought Berke Bear-Uchtengel can fill that void. Unfortunately, it just wasn't the case. And point guard's the easiest one, right? Where does most playmaking come from? The point guard position. Nebraska needs to get a point guard. We've had some really good talent. Chucky Hepburn being the most obvious one in state that we have failed to get through our doors here at the University of Nebraska. And then you have a chance to re-recruit him after he's transferring out of Wisconsin. We can't get him again. He goes over to Louisville. Shout out to Chucky Hepburn. I'm not even saying it's a bad decision. He just had an awesome game winner in their conference play versus Stanford. Unfortunately, Stanford, one of the worst time turnovers I've ever seen. And it goes right into Chucky Hepburn's hands. He pulls up, makes a buzzer beater to go ahead and win that game. So, none of this to shame Chucky Hepburn. The guy's having a lot of success. It's up to us, and I want to say us, Nebraska recruiting, and arguably the biggest, if you wanted Fred Hoiberg out, I think the biggest reason would be he struggles at recruiting. or at least he doesn't have a guy on staff right now who's really killed it in getting some of these recruits. And part of that might be the NIL operations. I don't know how much our basketball program has money to give compared to our football program. I can almost guarantee you the football program has a lot more money per player they can offer than basketball. So that's always a little bit in the woods. We can read numbers. I never know how real those numbers are when it comes to NIL, because you'll have 5 different universities on the same day all put out a tweet saying we are number 1 in NIL spending. It's all kind of hidden behind the doors there. We don't really know entirely how much is getting spent. Just rumors for the most part. If you're just an everyday casual fan or even a hardcore fan, you're not getting that audit the same way the people up top are. So I don't know if it's money, but that's the problem. Like, we've had recruiting problems here at Nebraska, and then getting K-State Tominaga was fantastic. Finding gems like Rink Mast has been really good for Nebraska, but we haven't had an ability to just go ahead and get the guys that are almost surefires. And I don't really want 100%, but when you look at a guy like Hunter South, you look at a guy like Chucky Hepburn, in your border, you have to figure out a way to get those guys to this program and almost sell the idea the same way Matt Rule's kind of selling it, that yes, this is part of a rebuild, but I'm fully confident of it, and you will be greatly remembered much more than if you go ahead and go play for a program who's already winning. If you do it here, you will be leaving behind a legacy, and Nebraska fans will forever cherish you. And, obviously that's not word for word for Matt Rule saying, but I think that's kind of the sell, right? You don't get this many great athletes without selling to Dylan Rayola. Family connections help. That this is the place where you can have an impactful legacy that will far outlast anything you do at a program that's already winning. And it's a tough thing to sell because it's got to be authentic. But I think that's probably the biggest problem for Nebraska basketball is just recruiting within our own state. It's hard. You're not going to get everybody, but you got to get at least a couple of those guys that can be definitive program movers, that can move the needle. And unfortunately for this year, Bryce Williams was fantastic. Juwan Gary, Andrew Morgan, Braxton Mia, the seniors, they're here for a little bit, but really Juwan Gary, Bryce Williams, for the amount of time they put in this program, it sucks to see them not leave with an NCAA tournament win. But at the same time, if this program does what it should do, you continue to elevate this program. Hopefully those guys were part of the foundation that we can start getting some of those better players in here. I think Fred Hoiberg offensively gets the praise he deserves. I think Nate Lenzer gets the praise he deserves for what he does defensively. That missing piece is who is that A-level recruiter who can go and walk into a building and get immediate respect and at least get those guys willing to listen about why Nebraska basketball might be a good avenue to go in. With that being said, we'll throw it to break here. Might have one more segment on the other side. If not, you'll be joined by Nick Standard down there at the Vault. Harrison Arns on the 1s and 2s. Talk to you in a little bit.
Be sure to check out the top-selling Recomp. Recomp helps build lean muscle and strength while decreasing body fat. Recomp is ideal for men and women of all ages trying to look their best. Recomp can only be found in Nutrition Authority. For info, visit mynutritionauthority.com.
The electrical workers of Local Union 265 are now hiring licensed journeyman electricians from $32.50 to $42.50 per hour with paid benefits. And if you're looking for a new career, they're hiring apprentices at $19.50 per hour with paid benefits. Call the office at 402-423-4497 to apply. Start your electrical career today.
Experience the Landmark difference with the next level of dealer support. Landmark, your local John Deere dealer, continually works to have parts on hand the first time you walk in the door. Our internal route system means we can get the parts to you typically same or next day to keep you up and running. At Landmark, we understand time is money. Get more uptime with our after-hours parts and service support on the phone or in the field. Stop by your local Landmark today to experience the Landmark difference.
This is Lincoln's home for sports talk on the FM dial. Also online at theticketfm.com. On the internet. KNTK FM Firth, 93.7 The Ticket.
Your possibilities are endless at Doane University. Rooted in liberal arts, you can choose from undergraduate and graduate programs, all delivering real-world experience. At Doane University, we take a personal approach to education, giving you the guidance you need to own your future. It's not just our long history of innovative learning, it's the feeling of being surrounded by possibilities that makes us different. Now is your time. Take a big step toward your dream career and apply today at doane.edu/apply.
Hi everyone, Kendall Warnock, A1 Automotive in downtown Lincoln. The last few years have been wild. but we've been here for you through all the ups and downs, and we'll be here for you when you need us the most, for all your travels and for your day-to-day driving. With winter conditions causing problems all over town, the last thing anyone needs this year is constant car troubles. Let us help you drive in peace and make sure you drive to work and to winter destinations safe. A1 Automotive, 11th and L Street downtown, always honest answers.
I'm softball player Jordy Ball, and I'm proud of my Nebraska roots, and I'm proud to be back home. And at Midwest Bank, they're proud to be your local community bank. They believe in family first, taking initiative, showing integrity, and rolling up their sleeves to support their local communities. They treat everyone like family, no matter where you're from. Whether you walk into a branch in York, Lincoln, Norfolk, or Pierce, you know you're going to be welcomed with a smile. Your community, your bank, Midwest Bank.
Back to the Ticket weeknights on 93.7 The Ticket and theticketfm.com.
All right, welcome back in. Harrison Arens joining you one final time here before we get ready to throw things back over to the Vault Pinnacle Bank Arena. Nick Sainert, G. Foreman calling some Class C2 action. Only a little bit of time here left, so we'll switch it up. We'll talk NBA here, and I just want to give an update on what the standings are looking like, and we can also talk a little bit of MVP debate if we get into it. Right now, the Cavaliers still clearly leading the East 56-10. Celtics behind them, 48-19. Knicks at 3, 42-23. Over in the West, you do got the Thunder, number one, 54-12 record, with an average roster age of 24 years old, by the way, which is just insane to think about when you think of the Thunder, whose average age is 24, and then you go look at Auburn college basketball, whose average roster age is 23. You know, it's a segment all in itself. I don't know like how surefire, how it would work out, but at some point, I will say we need to put a cap on college athletes' age. Like maybe the answer is 25. At a certain point in life, life's going to hand you some cards that just suck, that aren't fair. But unfortunately, that's life. You can't be playing at a ridiculous age or ridiculous years amount of college, because at that point, you're a grown man who's playing 18, 19, 20-year-olds. And that's just a whole beef in itself. That happened with that Miami player. It was like 9 years. It's like, it's a horrible story. Like it's unfortunate. But at a certain point in time, that's just the cards that were dealt, and you can't fix it for everybody, because then you have grown men playing 18-year-olds in a physical contact sport. So that's my 2 cents on that one. Going back to the NBA, though, like I said, Thunder, average age of 23, Auburn's average age 23, Thunder's average age 24, Nuggets, number 2 in the West, 43-24 record, and the Rockets coming up from the bottom, 42-25, as well as the Grizzlies tied with them, but they got the tiebreaker, 42-25 as well. And then the Lakers, you can imagine, they add Luka Doncic. It's been really successful, but LeBron's been sitting out a lot in this one, and now they're on a 4-game losing streak, and it's also the toughest part of their schedule by far. The Lakers, as of late, I mean, it's been a gauntlet for them. They've started to have to play the Knicks, the Celtics, then they get the Nets, Bucks, but then they have the Nuggets, Suns, Spurs, Nuggets, Bucks. Brutal stretch for the end here. All this to say, though, is when I look at the West, the Lakers, I'm not entirely sure how big of a contender there are. If I still had to pick one team in the West, I'd still pick the Nuggets. If I had to pick one team in the East, I'd probably pick the Celtics. I credit the Cavs for what they do. And why I love the Cavs is they just don't believe in load management. It's a little bit refreshing to see an NBA team that says, like, no, the guys are healthy, go play. That's what the Cavs do. And that's why their guys win more often than not, because when they're ready, their best players suit up and go play on the game. Not the same case with most teams in the NBA anymore. You're going to find reasons why they're not out there playing. But nonetheless, I do give the Cavaliers a ton of credit for that, because it's better for the NBA. When you have guys that are healthy, have them go play. We don't need a million load management games. Not so me saying that. You have Damian Lillard at times in some of his podcasts talking about how load management, it's not always even his decision. Like, someone will just come up to him that night and be like, hey, you're out that game. And, you know, when you get to the port, they'll make a reason. Like, sore hamstring, wrist injury, something very minor that is kind of It's like when you go to your doctor and you have a headache. There's no real good way to check for the headache, but the doctor doing their job is going to believe you and try to figure out a way to solve that problem. It's the kind of same thing with league. You can make up an injury that's really hard for them to put any sort of real pressure on it being fake or not. If it's minor, a day-to-day, then you can come back whenever you want. That stuff really hurts the league. So it is refreshing to see a team like the Cavaliers refuse to really buy into that load management. When their guys are ready, they play, and that's why they're the number one seed in the East. That being said, the Celtics do load management at times. Not as egregious as other teams, but that's why I think when we get to the playoffs, the Celtics is just such a deep roster, and if all those guys are ready to go, I'm probably going to pick them to go ahead and go through the East again. Once they got over that hump of breaking through the Eastern Conference Finals, that was kind of the needle for me. And in the West, like, I don't care what you say, Nikola Jokic is the MVP. In that game versus the OKC Thunder, he proved it once again. He took that one a little bit personal. And for everybody who says Nikola Jokic doesn't care about basketball, he only cares about horses, that's just a ludicrous take. You don't get that good and only care about horses. That guy loves basketball. He just doesn't necessarily, in my opinion, I never talked to him, obviously. He doesn't love the media aspect of it and being constantly, prompted as a celebrity. And that's just my read on it. But for him to say that he doesn't care about basketball is insane. Go watch like 5 games of that guy playing basketball and you won't ever say that anymore. You get that because you watch him at a horse jockey event or a derby event, and you just think, man, this guy doesn't care. He enjoys his home. He enjoys horses, but that guy definitely loves basketball, just maybe not the media and glamour side of it. So I'm still going to lean with the best player that I think is in the world right now, Nikola Jokic. And him dropping, was 30 points, 20 boards, 20 assists that one night kind of solidified that this guy's unreal. Not to mention, you got a guy of that size shooting over 40% from 3. It's just unstoppable. And the last time, any teams are having success with Jokic, they're applying the Jokic rules essentially. It's the closest thing you'll see to how they guarded Kareem back in the day. Literally put everybody around him willing to sacrifice guys like Brown in the corner wide open just to make sure Jokic doesn't get the ball, because that's how good he is. And you might be able to do that for one game. You might be able to do that for 2 games. But through the course of a 7-game series, it's tough to do. And it's not like the Jordan rules back in the day either. Like if you just try to completely mug Jokic, which I will say, he does not get any fouls called on him. I shouldn't say any. He hardly gets any fouls called on him because he doesn't flop, which is somewhat admirable. But that is a different NBA that we play in today. Like if you try to mug him the same way they tried to do Jordan back in the day, Jokic is going to have to be at that free throw line all day long. So that's my take on it. I do got another Nuggets and I got Celtics. I think the Nuggets will recover after losing to the Timberwolves from last year. And I think the Celtics will keep on doing what they have been doing, is winning basketball. And I imagine they'll find themselves back in the Eastern Conference Finals and then once again into the NBA Finals. That's going to do it for me. Up next, Nick Sainert, give me the signal. He's ready to call some more state hoops here. You got Bergen versus Cross County. That is your C2 championship matchup. Those guys will join you next on 93.7 The Ticket, ticketfm.com.